Hello and welcome to Learning Curve, a look at how education is adapting to the rush of generative AI. I'm Jeff Young, a longtime education journalist. This week, we are tackling a really big question. How is AI impacting creativity and art? Will artificial intelligence unleash a wave of creativity? Or will the presence of this technology actually stifle it? To explore these questions, I talked with two prominent artists with different takes on this issue. And honestly, this is an all-star episode, so you are in for a treat. This episode got its start last month when I was at Sarah Lawrence College, right outside New York City, to give a talk. And of course, anywhere I go, I try to find interesting people to talk to for this podcast. Wherever I go, I ask for recommendations for professors who are digging into AI in interesting and nuanced ways. And someone said there was this art professor that I just had to meet.
I'm Angela Ferriolo, and I am a professor. There's no ranks at Sarah Lawrence. I'm a professor of visual arts at Sarah Lawrence College, and I'm also, it's called a computational artist. So I use code. All of my artwork is based on code, and I build systems that change over time.
Angela lives in the city, so we arranged to meet up at the New York Public Library. We sat in the plaza in front of this iconic library building. You can probably picture this building. It's the one with the lion statues in front. It seemed like a fitting setting since this is one of the largest holdings of human creative work in the world. It is also one of the most visited, so you'll hear some honking and city noises in the background giving flavor to the scene. I started by asking her why she was drawn to incorporating AI into her art.
How I got into AI, right, was through the video game industry, which is a very different kind of AI than prompt-driven, what's called generative AI.
Yeah, you were making like some of the first massive multiplayer online games, right? Back in 2002?
Yeah, exactly. And it just seems like another lifetime. We thought it was so amazing and space age back then, but like, of course, now it's really surpassed like anything we could have imagined at the time. But yeah, so to me, AI means making things that have behaviors that convince humans they're intelligent. It's not so much this system of typing in a prompt and then getting back a picture. Like I have a different experience of what AI is, and I have different goals when I sit down to work with AI. So I almost never use prompt generated AI, although I do, I have used it, of course, and it's a wonderful experience.
Angela's films are hard to explain. They're experimental, and they're designed to be pushing boundaries of art. And her efforts have won acclaim, including appearing in the New York Film Festival and in SIGGRAPH, the big annual conference about computer graphics. One of her recent works involves using AI to bring different ways of seeing familiar scenes in New York City.
So this movie was to build a camera, like a synthetic camera, and to ask it to look at the world the way an AI might see the world. And I took three different AI or three different spatial regimes. The first was the Cartesian regime, which is how you and I see and how a regular camera sees. And it just shows you what's out there, what's in the world. And then the second regime was called a spatial or a relational regime. And it might be like if you were in a maze, you could imagine this. So think of my video game background, right? If you were in a maze that changed, like you would take a step and the maze would reorganize itself. It was that kind of an intelligence. And the third regime was just an agental regime. So the AI builds its intelligence based on where things are in relation to itself.
I'll put a link to her work in the show notes. I started by asking her why she was drawn to incorporating AI into her art.
I think there's something about seeing an intelligence that isn't a human intelligence and seeing like there's something unnatural about it and there's something weird about it. And in a way, it becomes fascinating over time.
You're just almost like creating this form that you don't know what it's going to do next. That interesting?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you kind of know what it's kind of like if you have a kid, like you kind of know the range, but you don't really know what's going on all the time, right? I know parents out there will feel sympathy for this kind of thing.
Do you have kids yourself?
Oh, of course I do. Yeah. And so some are very tech Some are very like love technology, and some reject technology. So it's like it's sort of an interesting situation.
These days, Angela is encouraging her students at Sarah Lawrence to experiment with AI tools as well. And so I wanted to hear what they are doing with these new tech tools.
It's interesting who turns out for the AI classes, because it's not the art students. It's the students who wanted to be artists and felt because they didn't start like at a very young age, they could never be artists. That is mostly who will take an AI class and make their first movie and do their first drawing and make their first graphic novel using AI. So in that sense, it's been that tech promise of the great democratizer, right? I mean, that is the AI promise. Anyone can make a movie, things like that. That's what I've seen in my classes.
And that's happening.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's absolutely what's going on in my classes. People who feel like, oh, these kids in my dorm, they've been doing music since they were 7 or 8 and they're like so advanced and I could never write music. I'm like, sure, you can write music. Like, to sit down with an AI for a week and I'll teach you. Like, you won't have the same skill set your roommate has, but you'll understand. You won't feel like it's impossible. So I've seen that.
And what kind of movies are they making?
I had a movie made about a student's like winter vacations with his family, and like sort of a blur between like how I remember this vacation and like how like the good parts and the bad parts, like a very like strange fantasy review of vacations. And then I had another student from the Dominican Republic take all of these mythologies of the Dominican Republic and make those into AI movies. And then I had another student who was convinced her supermarket in the Bronx was haunted by vampires and created this supermarket that was haunted by vampires as their AI film project. Like a family birthday that you weren't there for that you've recreated, or someone's wedding, like my great-great-grandparents' wedding. I'm going to recreate this in AI.
Do you think this is something the students get something? I mean, this is like was not possible before, it's fair to say.
It was absolutely not possible before. And, in a certain sense, AIs remove the risk they might feel, like taking a film course and going out, because you could just sit down and write the script and like cast people and like go to California, but the economics are different. But also that level of risk is different, right? It's a lot of time, and then you've got to work with a lot of people, so it's like a really different way of making a film. And these students, appreciated those differences.
I'm curious, like, what's the stakes? Like, were they getting a lot out of this, as our, because you could say like, oh, it's so quick. I don't know how their projects, but, oh, if it's so quick, do they get the same depth of the, feeling?
Because it's because those obstacles have been removed.
Yeah, right.
I think they do. I think they go, it's much more of a what if kind of proposition though. So I think it's a lot more like improvisational theater might be, where you're working with a collaborator and they take the story this way and like you kind of build on it. So it's like a back and forth. So I saw that, and I saw people try crazy ideas. Like, yes, I can make that science fiction movie now because I can do it. So in that sense, I thought it was great. In the sense of like what's lacking is getting people to show up, to hold the boom microphone, and like dealing with like getting the location cleared through student affairs, and like finding the right person. Like, how do I direct this person in a scene? Like all of that is missing, right? But then there are other skills that are AI skills, which are, just like it's like a different skill set. And that's really what I saw in the class is like, wow, this is an entirely different skill set that you'll need to make an AI film as successfully as to make a live action film. But we've sort of defined those problems and we can teach to those. And these are new problems that are a little bit trickier to teach too.
Of course, not all artists are excited about the influx of generative AI. And one of the most vocal artists who is warning about the downsides of AI for art is the science fiction writer Ted Chiang. Like Angela Ferriolo, he has his roots in tech. He worked as a technical writer for years, and his short stories often explore issues of technology. His work has won major awards, including 4 Hugo Awards and 4 Nebula Awards. Barack Obama has recommended his short story collection, Exhalation, and in 2023, Time magazine called Chiang perhaps the world's most celebrated living science fiction author. I connected with Ted Chiang last week by Zoom, where he talked to me from his home outside of Seattle.
My name is Ted Chiang. I'm a science fiction short story writer, and more recently, I have written some essays on generative AI.
One of those essays that he modestly mentioned ran last year in The New Yorker. It was titled, Why AI Isn't Going to Make Art.
I didn't pick the title of that essay. If I had, I probably would have titled it, Why AI Won't Make Art Easy to Make. Because what I'm interested in is not so much the question of whether AI on its own can make art, but whether generative AI can be a useful tool for artists. And my very strong sense is that it cannot be a useful tool for artists.
He notes that the tools are sold as a way to unleash creativity, but he argues that what they're actually doing is quite the opposite.
I guess the way I would frame it is that I would say that we can think of art as a concentrated form of intention. And generative AI is being sold as a tool which produces large outputs on the basis of small inputs. And
in other words, if I type a little bit of a prompt, like, hey, make me an art piece, a visual art piece, I don't have to say much, and then it makes something big.
Yes. And even if no matter how much you type, the selling point of the tool is that it is generating more output than you are putting into it. And my claim is that will inevitably mean a dilution of your intention. And so any tool that works that way, whatever the technological underpinning is, any tool that works that way will not be a useful tool for artists. Artists need a tool which basically, you have large inputs in order to create large outputs. And
what's an example?
So I would say that Photoshop is a tool. Conventional Photoshop is a good tool for visual artists because the user interface for Photoshop is extremely complicated.
Sure.
It takes years to master Photoshop. You have very fine control over the outputs. Any tool that is good for an artist is something that will have like a very large user interface that will enable very fine control over the outputs. Generative AI is being sold as something which, you only need to, provide smaller inputs. It's being sold as a way to, reduce the amount of effort you need. And that will inevitably mean it reduces the degree of control that you have over the output. And that, I think, runs counter to the art making process.
The other day, I had an experience with AI that I think illustrates his point. I tried out the new version of Anthropic's Claude, the one called Claude Fable, which is so powerful it was briefly blocked by the US government. To see what it can do, I prompted Claude to make a web-based video game. And for fun, I asked it to recreate a game that I made when I was a kid, first learning to program on the Commodore 64 computer. Yep, I know, I'm old, that was a long time ago. Anyway, making a game back then was kind of an ordeal. I had to learn how to make all the graphics for it, which in BASIC I remember were called sprites. And I had to figure out how to make them move when the user hit a key. It was laborious, and I kept having to make changes to my planned game because of all the limitations that I hit. Of course, Claude's Fable model spun up a working game that far surpassed anything I made as a kid, and it did it in just a few minutes, based on a short description from me. And the AI tool just made all these design decisions on its own, based on my limited prompt. I asked Ted Chiang if this was the kind of shortcut he was worried about with AI creations.
If you are trying to express yourself, if you have a vision in your mind, which you are trying to get out there, the only way that you are going to get it out there is to, specify it in great detail. And
If you use the AI tools.
well, no, just in general.
I see, whether it's Photoshop or your clay in your hands.
Yes, or or a pencil or a paintbrush, or if you were writing code. Generative AI, because it is taking a relatively short prompt, and I don't mean that the prompt has to be like super short, but the the prompt is the selling point is that the prompt is shorter than you doing it yourself.
Mm.
And that is that reduces the amount of control that you have. So in the context of, say, prose fiction, if you are a writer, a lot of times you will sweat over individual word choices.
Sure.
Because the individual words matter to you. Like they're going to be sentences whose very specific phrasing will be essential to the effect that you are trying to create.
Mm.
And that is what it means to write fiction. But this is true of any art form. If you're a visual artist, there are going to be very subtle effects that you are interested in the image. And if you are a musician, there are likewise going to be very subtle effects in the music that you are after. And if you are a video game creator, there are also going to be very subtle effects that you are trying to achieve to create the gameplay experience that you have in mind. And conventional tools give you that degree of control over the final product. Generative AI does not.
Let me ask, I'm curious, let me ask you this, because this is one of those things, as I talk to so many people for my podcast and my reporting, I feel like there's so many people that end up hearing, critiques of AI, and they're like, oh, well, there's always something you can do. Maybe it's not the writing of the words like you're describing now, but, I know you have worked as a technical writer. You're very steeped in, you understand the technology, how it works. Like, what would you say to someone who's like, oh, well, is there some way you could use the AI tool to help you plan, or like something in the creative process that isn't the actual maybe writing of the words, but then something that would help you? I'm curious if you have any thoughts of how it could help a creative, but not maybe in the direct making of the art.
I guess I don't know that generative AI is going to be better for artists than, say, the conventional tools that we already have.
Sure.
Like if you are looking for, say, a brainstorming tool, I mean, okay.
People talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. But the thing is, I mean, we already have brainstorming tools, and they did not require $100 billion to develop, and yeah, they do the job. So it's not that, you can't use generative AI as a brainstorming tool, but the question is more like, did you need that? What is it doing that existing brainstorming tools could not do? And, if it is appreciably like sort of reducing the amount of, effort, then it's reducing your authorship. It's reducing the amount of control you have over the final product. So that, again, works against you as an artist.
So what does Ted Chiang think about this idea that AI could democratize art and bring more people into the creative process? And what's at stake for the future of creativity? We'll have that right after the break. This episode was brought to you by Studiosity. Real learning needs a struggle. But for educators, assessment security just means more detective work. And that's not what students came for. And it's not what the teachers came for. True learning and authorship isn't found in a probability score or a surveillance log. It's found in the journey. Studiosity makes assessment security easy by shifting the burden away from every educator and into a proactive, institution-wide infrastructure. From Viva-style inputs to clear binary validity reporting, Studiosity is the multi-layered assessment security process, turning institutional policy into practice. Just a clear signal to the teacher, owned by the student, that I did this thinking. De-risk your assessment flow and reduce workload. Give your teachers back the time to teach, not police. And give your students the agency to show their own growth. Keep the learning real with Studiosity. Get the walkthrough at studiosity.com/learning curve. That's studiosity.com/learning curve. I want to also remind you of my other big project these days. I'm writing the Chronicle of Higher Education's newsletter about AI on campuses called Jagged Intelligence. I track news and give some analysis of the good and the challenging of AI at colleges. Every week I have an example of an AI use case, and I report the results of our latest audience poll. And these have been pretty lively lately. People have a lot to say about AI. If you haven't already, I hope you will head over to chronicle.com and click on the word newsletters to sign up. Now back to the episode. These two artists are framing the issue of art and creativity differently, and they have different concerns. But I was curious to hear what Ted Chiang thought of a couple of points that Angela Ferriolo made, especially her comment that she sees AI making it possible for more students to do things like make music and movies to express their ideas.
That is the AI promise. Anyone can make a movie, things like that. That's what I've seen in my classes.
I played Ted a longer version of that quote, the same one you heard earlier in the episode, to get his thoughts.
This notion that generative AI somehow democratizes art, I think, is total nonsense. And so the analogy I often use is, no one thinks that you can democratize marathon running by handing out mopeds. That is not what marathon running is. Anyone can run a marathon if they put their put enough effort into it. You might not run a marathon fast, but you can run a marathon.
Right.
And we need to maintain a distinction between people who actually run a marathon and people who just say, like, I've always wanted to run a marathon.
Or does the scooter, runs it on a scooter.
Yes. If you just ride a moped to the finish line, you have not run a marathon. It doesn't do us any good to redefine marathon running to include people who ride mopeds to the finish line. And so in the same way, making art is already, entirely democratized. Anyone can make art if they try. And you might not make great art, but that's not the criteria. It's like, if you are, can you make art? Yes, you can make art. As for the idea that, okay, so some people may be having some experience where it's like, oh, they feel like they are making art using generative AI. I would say that what is actually happening is that they are engaging in plagiarism, but they don't know it. And so,
because the models have been trained on the internet and art.
books and
because again, like as I've said, or as I said in the New Yorker essay, art requires making many, many choices,
right.
countless thousands of choices. And yes, it is hard to make thousands and thousands of choices. Um, and if you don't want to make that many choices, plagiarism is one way to avoid having to do that. But most
Mm.
of the time, people who engage in plagiarism, they know that they are engaged in plagiarism. What generative AI offers is a way to engage in plagiarism, but it feels like you're not.
Mhm.
You aren't even aware that you're engaged in plagiarism. So
It's like
uh,
whitewashing plagiarism the way you're making it sound.
it absolutely is. And uh, there's this programmer named Simon Willison who says that um, training AI is money laundering for copyrighted data.
Mm.
And so, if you are, if you are the beneficiary of, money laundering, if you're the, you know, things might seem great. It seems like, oh my God, look at how much money we're making from this car wash. Um, uh, because like, yeah, if you don't know that, all sorts of crimes were committed, it's like, yeah, you think car washes are extraordinarily profitable.
Mm.
And in the same way, if you're using generative AI to, make something, it's like, oh, this feels great. But that's because, you are unaware of the crime, the plagiarism that underlies it. And yes, it feels good to be able to, see things come out of nothing if you are ignorant of the crime that
Mm.
underlies that. Um, uh, Being unaware of crime, that feels great, but that doesn't remove the reality that, you know, that crimes were committed.
You're making this distinction, which for we talk a lot on Learning Curve about cheating and student misuse of AI to turn it, to put it forward as their own work. But in a way, you're painting a picture where any business person, anybody, whether they're a student or not, using it is kind of doing an act of plagiarism potentially with the generative AI tool like ChatGPT.
Yes, absolutely, because, you um, legality aside, plagiarism is claiming you did something when you didn't do it. You are claiming authorship of something which you did not create. In the business setting, being a plagiarist for, some report, whether the firm will penalize you for it or not, that's a separate question. But you, by virtue of, offering up a report as your own work when you didn't write it, you have engaged in plagiarism. And so, the fact that like, well, it's not like no one can trace it. There's no original document that anyone can identify. That's not the point. The point is you claimed that you did something and you didn't do it, and that uh, so that is that's why I'm talking about plagiarism as a moral failing as opposed to completely separate from the legal issues or whatever other external repercussions there might be. You
Yeah,
have you have lied about what you did.
I guess that you're sort of hinting at it here, but what are the stakes for you? Why does this matter for society, whether these AI tools are kind of unleashing creativity or suppressing it or creating these moral failures instead?
Well, so it is not unleashing creativity. It is normalizing lying.
Mm.
Um, uh, it is uh, it is an attempt to sort of uh, change all of our societal norms about what it means to say you did something, what it
Mm.
means to put your name on something. Um, Up until now, we had certain expectations that if you put your name on something, you were the one who made it.
Mm.
Um, now, generative AI is sort of an attempt to dissolve those norms so that, putting your name on something means nothing. Doesn't mean you made it. And, and the generative AI companies would have us all say, like, that's okay. Doesn't really matter if you made it or not. You can put your name on anything. And I think, that is going to have a corrosive effect on society.
In her work, Angela is interested in how AI tools will change art forms like film and television.
What really makes film work, so one of the first things if you ever teach film is you show students like the very first movies, which were lockdown cameras with no editing in it. They're unbearable to just one shot.
Yeah.
And how it's like watching a play. It's like watching a play, but you don't have the vibe of being in a room with live actors, right? But you're watching a play and a scene starts, like someone walks onto the stage and someone walks off of the stage, and like if someone hides, they hide this person in a barrel and put the lid on the barrel, and then there's a reveal, the person comes out of the barrel, and you're just like, wow.
You have seen these grainy black and white film clips. They're painfully slow to watch, even when objects and people are moving around in the frame. It just feels so static.
From there, we go through montage, and you see how like actually cutting film actually creates the story in the film. And you could think of that great scene at the end of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, where it's nothing but cuts from one face to another, and it creates the entire tension of the scene, right?
In the film clip she mentions from this famous Western, the camera cuts from a wide shot showing the two men in cowboy hats in the midst of a pistol duel. Then there's a close-up shot of one man's hand at his side ready to pull his weapon, and then a close-up of the opponent's hand about to draw his weapon. You get the idea. The story is being carried forward entirely by the way these shots are framed and ordered.
In AI, it's different. It's like I can take this and change it into something else. So like while I'm sitting here, I could change into like a giant like panda bear, or a giant like ice cream cone, or whatever I would like to change
Just
into.
to stretch into something else.
And right. So what that theory is about is what happens to film and what happens to us as we watch film, as we move from that cut from one idea to another, becoming a transformation. Because what you're really like love to watch in an AI film is transformation that happens in front of you, right? So that's just a difference. And there are several differences. And as you watch students working with AI film, you realize they're slightly changing the rules of storytelling here. Like they jump around in time much, much more. Like, and those jumps are less motivated. And characters can come and go. And storylines can be like very compressed, and things that require dramatization in traditional live action film, maybe like just and then we went to Mars or something like that. It was like very fast kind of transition. And what's interesting is the actual moment and how it's changing in front of the camera.
Wow, I mean that seems kind of disorienting, and I've even seen some, little AI videos that do this kind of thing, like you say, like somebody changes into a panda, and you're just like, it's a little bit disorienting.
It's a little bit disorienting, and it does weird things to your sense of time that like the montage doesn't do. So we'll see what happens with. I don't know where that's going personally, but I do notice things. Like the first thing about these new technologies is just what do you notice, and how do you feel while you're watching it? But they kind of are disorienting.
Right. But there could be good things that come out of this.
Yeah, I mean, it's students have a hard time when I tell them photography used to be was not considered an art form when photography came into existence.
Yeah.
People said that's the original black box. Actually, if you take our technology and power, it's that camera, right? Is the black box.
Sure.
And people were like, the photographer does nothing. The photography presses a button, and that's very much what people think about computer art right now. Like the computer artist presses a button and out comes the artwork. And I'm like, yeah, that's still how people think, even after, photography, after video games, after all of these art forms, which are so much work and so hard won.
And had to fight for respect.
And had to fight for respect. Exactly. Here we are right back again at the bottom of the hill.
What was Ted Chiang's take on this idea? That AI is going to change popular art forms and maybe how we see the world in the process. Again, he sees things differently.
First of all, I guess the comparison is not to something like the advent of film, because the advent of film created an entirely new medium which did not exist before. And, so far, generative AI, that is not what it is doing. It is creating stuff creating slop in an existing medium.
I see.
So, generative AI is not offering some new smell-o-vision. If someone creates a technology for smell-o-vision, it's like, okay, yes, that's a possible new medium, new artistic medium, but that's not what generative AI is doing. So the comparison is more to something like, the advent of, CGI, or visual effects. And the example of the morph, morphing has been around for as long as CGI has been around.
I guess.
So,
I see what you mean.
Do you remember the Michael Jackson video for Black or White? That was.
I do remember that.
Yeah. So, it's not like morphing is new. But okay, if we talk about this in terms of like an analogy to things like VFX, VFX offered filmmakers, new tools for their toolbox.
And I guess generative AI is democratizing those effects, let's just say. Because you're right, it is certainly not new to be able to morph, but it's now something I could go do, I suppose.
Again, I don't think it's democratizing it. It is, in some ways, it is, it's making it easy to plagiarize without, feeling like you're plagiarizing. So in terms of whether it's possible for, people to make good art with this, I would say that, or do interesting things with it. It's not impossible, but people are going to have to put a lot of effort into it because, like I said, making art requires making, thousands and thousands of decisions.
Yeah.
So, if there are ways to use these tools where, if you were spending 1,000 hours with it, I'm prepared to say that, yeah, you are making art, but it's going to require thousands of hours. And that is not the selling point. If you were spending thousands of hours, to create a single effect, you are not using the tool the way it is being advertised because they're selling this tool as a way of making it, quick and easy. If it becomes quick and easy, then it is, I would say, pretty much definitionally not art because you did not make all the necessary decisions that art requires. So if you are using a tool in such a way that, it basically is requiring as much of your time and effort as if you were doing it the conventional way, but you're getting something different. It's like, okay, that, yes, I'm prepared to say that, you're making art because you are putting in, the time, you are making countless choices in the creation process. But, if you were using it in a way to, sort of accelerate your production, then, you are not engaged in the creation of art.
I want to make clear that Angela largely agrees with Ted on the labor involved in making art. And she is not looking for shortcuts.
I think it's really hard to make art, and it's a long process, and it takes a long time to learn to use a pencil. Like, everyone has pencils, not everyone's an artist with a pencil, is the great line, right? By, I think, who's that? David Lynch, or I'm doing a miss.
Yeah, I'll look it up. But
Yeah.
We'll ask AI.
We'll ask the AI who said that. There's a big idea that it will do everything faster and better, but we've all heard that. Like, if you're over the age of 10, you've heard it will be faster and better, and we know it will create its own like cul-de-sacs and its own sand traps, and people will battle through them. I don't think it will be faster and better. It will be different. It will create different production obstacles that you have to get through, and it is like, I have lived through several kinds of waves of automation, right? And it is a kind of automation that is something to be concerned about if you have those skills that have been automated.
And she has plenty of tough questions about how AI companies operate. In fact, she teaches a course at Sarah Lawrence called Art, Technology, and Power that critiques the tech industry.
I think it's good to be optimistic. I think it's good to be realistic, though, because we've had these tremendous decenterings in our recent past, right? We had deindustrialization, digitization, financialization, and it concentrates power among certain institutions, and the consequences are paid by other kinds of people, and it's bad. That stuff's bad. And when you look at the recent past, there's no reassurance that we're going to handle this next wave of automation in an equitable fashion. So all of the anxieties justified, I think.
Can art make a difference in that?
Yeah, I mean, art always makes it. Art gives people the imagination to make a difference. Art doesn't make a difference. Art inspires the imagination to have it be different, or to maybe find a path that will be different, right? Yeah.
Huh.
And without that idea in your mind, you can't make things better.
Yeah.
But people make things better. Art doesn't make things better.
But there's this worry that these generative AI tools kind of flatten things and are not leading to the kind of creativity, because the AI people are happy to just say, like, give me something, and then it's kind of the generic kind of version of what everybody's put into the system over the years. And so is there a worry that you have about less creativity?
So that's like always, AI is not that. A lot of people see AI as a shortcut. It's not a shortcut. It's an amplifier. So if I have a student who's going to not write a paper, they would go, 40 years ago, they'd go retype something out of an encyclopedia and hand it in as their paper. Or 20 years ago, they'd copy and paste something from the internet. Now they put it into an AI tool and generate it, and it's faster. There's even less. They're doing even less to get away. Yes, that student is eternal and lives forever.
Okay.
There's another student, equally amplified, right, who goes out to research the paper. This is very true at Sarah Lawrence, by the way.
Okay.
And disappears. And you're like, what happened to this person? Can we send out a search party? And they're lost in the library. Like, one book led to another book, led to another book. They come back to your office. They're like, just can't stop talking. Like, we get this all the time. AI is a great amplifier for that student, because that student is on the endless search, and AI is a wonderful collaborator for that. So I find it really just amplifies a natural tendency that there are some people who use it to take the scenic route. And I want to know everything about this. And they've got this great summary of all of our intelligence, right? So I can hold those students to a higher standard. Like, don't tell me you don't know what the Frankfurt School is. You're sitting right in front of ChatGPT. Ask ChatGPT what the Frankfurt School was.
Yeah.
And that student amplifies. And then the other student who is trying to get away with something is amplifying that. Like, they can get away with something faster and...
You were going to say maybe better, but yeah, like more effectively.
More effectively. But look, students who are listening, if you're using AI to write your papers and answer your email and it takes your job someday, it's on you, man. Like you you put yourself in that position. So yeah.
You get in what you put in. Oh, you get back what you put in.
You get back what you put in, even with AI. And with AI, it's very fast. So it's accelerated, it's amplified, but you can ask an AI, like, why is David Hume using this term? Exactly. Like, why does he keep coming back to this term? And you will find out. And I think that's wonderful for students.
As in many of these episodes of Learning Curve, I find it difficult to sum it all up. I'm guessing each of you had a very different reaction to what you just heard, depending on your perspective and your experiences. So for this episode, we are trying something different. We used AI to spin up an online tool to help you think through where you stand on these questions of AI, art, and creativity. I said we made the tool, but actually the idea came from a listener, Tara Baumgarten. She is a longtime learning experience designer and a fan of the podcast. She wrote me an email a couple weeks ago that was actually one of the coolest messages that I've gotten. She not only had this idea for what she called a companion app for Learning Curve, but she had already used Claude Code to make the app, and she included a working link in her email. Naturally, I called her up, and we brainstormed how to share this with all of you. And I'm happy to say you can try it right now. Just go to learningcurve.fm and click on the page for this episode, or just look in the show notes of the podcast app you're on, and you will see the link. Or you can type into your browser bit.ly/learningcurveapp. It's very simple, but very cool. It gives you prompts to reflect on questions raised in the episode. And you can move some slider bars to signal where you land on the spectrum of nuance that we've talked about. This just takes a couple minutes. I tried it myself and I found it really helpful in kind of thinking through these issues. So please check it out. There is an option to view what Tara calls your stance card when you're done. And if you want to screenshot that, you could post it on social media or just save it for yourself. As in all of our episodes, these are not black and white issues. And I suspect we are all just trying to figure out what we think of all this. This has been Learning Curve. On every episode, we tackle big questions at the intersection of AI and education. Please reach out if you have suggestions or ideas for the show. And I am curious what you think of this reflection tool. This episode was written and put together by me, Jeff Young, and you can find more about the podcast and my other work at learningcurve.fm. Our theme song is by Kamaku, with additional music by Blue Dot Sessions. The episode art was generated by Midjourney. And thanks to the sponsor for this episode, Studiosity. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another episode. I'll talk to you then. Until then, check out the reflection tool, learningcurve.fm.